Hello everyone, this is Professor Sexton with a video lecture on writing a literary analysis essay. This video lecture is in conjunction with a document and course documents called Writing a Literary Analysis Essay. Let me begin by sharing the document with you. So it should pull up on the screen in a moment. Here we go. It is a relatively long document, so I am not going to go over it word for word. What you'll want to do is to make sure that you read it for yourself. And then if you have any questions, you can ask those questions. The things that I want to do is just highlight some of the most important parts of the document. So let me begin by here. When you analyze a literary work, you are asking questions about it that are related to your main view of the work, the central ideal, thesis. In other words, you are giving the work meaning beyond what it tells you directly. So let me reiterate here. For the literary papers that you're writing in this course, you are not writing summaries of what happened in the paper. That is in the literary work. That is not what I want. I know what happened in the literary work. What I want to know is your interpretation of what happens. How do you read characters? How do you read actions? How do you read behaviors? What do those things say to you? And what you'll have to do is you'll have to use the literary text to support your view of it. Um, your objective in writing a literary analysis essay is to convince the person reading your essay that you have supported the ideal that you are developing. Therefore, for your papers, you need to have a thesis statement. The thesis statement is not so important for the reader as it is for you. Because what the thesis statement does is it reiterates to you what your main point is. What is it that you're trying to prove? And if you do not know what it is that you're trying to prove, then your paper is not going to support that argument. So you need to make sure that you have it clear in your head what it is that you want to do. Then once you have the thesis statement, that helps you develop your body paragraphs. And then what you can do is decide what information do I need in my supporting paragraphs to support the view that I'm going to give. What you see on this document is the examples of some thesis statements. So you'll see like a thesis statement for poetry, a thesis statement for short story, a thesis statement for drama. You want to make sure that in your introduction that there's always some reference to the author's full name and the title of the literary work. So you want to make sure that you read this information carefully. Also, with this document, for each paper that you write in this course, you'll want to go back to this document and look at it again, just to kind of refresh your memory about things. Let me spend a little time talking about the introduction. I know that a lot of us as writers struggle with an introduction. And let me tell you one reason why I think that is. I mean, usually with introductions, we write the introduction before we've written the paper. So if you think about it, how can you introduce a paper that you've not written? And I think that's where a lot of us get into trouble, and I think that's where a lot of us struggle. So there are different ways that you can do this. You can just start with a body paragraph, or you can write an introduction that is temporary. And what I mean by that is you write the introduction just so you can get started. Then you start to write the paper. Then once you've completed the paper, you go back and reread the introduction and make sure that introduction still works for the paper that you've written. You might just need to change the introduction. One of the things that you do want to do with an introduction for a literary paper is you want to begin with a general ideal or concept that is related to your central ideal or thesis. And you can do this by introducing a question, a quotation, a brief anecdote, which is just a story, a startling statement, or a combination of these. And then you transition from that to the main ideal that you're going to introduce. And the best way to do this is to look at some of the examples here. So let's look at this example for poetry. So here's the introduction. What would one expect to be the personality of a man who has his wife sent away to a convent or perhaps has had her murdered because she took too much pleasure in the sunset and in the compliment paid to her by another man. This first sentence is a general ideal or general concept. Notice that it has not even started to talk about the literary work, but what it does is it introduces a question, an ideal, and it sets up a context. Then in this next sentence, we transition from this general concept or ideal to the literary work. It is just such a man, a Renaissance Duke, who Robert Browning portrays in My Last Duchess. Notice here how the author of this introduction has given the complete title of given the full author's name, Robert Browning, and the title of the literary work, in this case, which is a poem, which is enclosed in quotation marks. And then this last sentence is the thesis statement. This is the point that this author wants to make in her essay. She writes, a character analysis of the Duke reveals that through his internal dialogue, his interpretation of earlier incidents, and his actions, that his traits, arrogance, jealousy, and greediness emerge. So this is what this student is going to illustrate and prove in her paper. And so this is a perfect example of a thesis statement, an introduction for a poetry paper. And there are some introduction don'ts that you don't want to have in your introduction. So don't begin with a formal announcement such as, my paper is going to be about, I am writing about, I choose to write on topic 2. Notice that neither of these sample introductions do any of that. So this is a way to model your introduction. Your body part of the essay is the most important part, because here is the information that you're going to use to support your thesis. And it's in this section where you give an explanation of your ideas using textual evidence. Textual evidence consists of summary, paraphrase, specific details, and detailed quotations from the literary work to illustrate your point and why you read the literary work as you do. Each paragraph should contain a topic sentence, and a topic sentence functions just like a thesis statement for the entire paper. What the topic sentence does is it indicates what this paragraph, what this supporting detail is going to do. Then everything that follows after that works to prove or illustrate that topic sentence. And so if you see here on the next page, you have an example. So what you have in yellow here is the topic sentence. This is what this author sets out to do in his paper. And then you see in the green, this is the textual evidence that the author is going to give in order to explain his topic sentence. The thing that you want to be careful here is when you use direct quotations from a literary text, you don't just want to put the literary quotations in. You need to do something with them. You need to analyze them and show how they work to illustrate your point. And so that is what this author does here. For the conclusion gives your essay a sense of completeness and reminds your readers of the general ideal of the concept of your paper. It touches upon the topics that you've used in the body paragraphs. However, with the conclusion, you want to do more than simply repeat what you've already stated. You want to leave your reader with a definitive statement about your analysis and how it's helped us understand the literary work. And one of the things that I think is really great to do with the conclusion is have that conclusion pick up in some of the same ways that your introduction started the paper. So for instance, look at this. This is a conclusion to a paper on My Last Duchess. And so the author writes here, if the Duke has any redeeming qualities, they fail to appear in the poem. Browning's emphasis on the Duke's traits of arrogance, jealousy, and materialism make it apparent that anyone who might have known the Duke personally would have based his opinion of him on these personality flaws. Ultimately, the reader's opinions of the Duke is not a favorable one, and it is clear that Browning intended the reader to feel this way. So read this conclusion and then go back and read the introduction. Notice how there is a sense of unity between that introduction and that conclusion. This is what you want to do in your papers as well. So the way that you begin the paper, you want to kind of end the paper the same way, but you don't want to just simply repeat what you've already stated. You want to move the argument forward. Um, Also, there are some conclusions don't begin your conclusions with in conclusion, to conclude, in summary, to sum up. Notice in this conclusion does not use any of those phrases. Oftentimes, when we use phrases such as in conclusion, to conclude, in summary, to sum up, those make more sense if we're giving a speech. Because when we're giving a speech, the audience does not have the paper in front of them. So we use those words to cue the audience in that we're wrapping up. However, when you're reading a paper and you get to the last page and you see the last paragraph, that is generally the conclusion. So you don't need that. So you want to make sure that you don't use that. Do not apologize in your conclusion. This is your analysis, it is your interpretation. So be proud of the work that you've done, be proud of the work that you have presented. Notice once again in this conclusion, there is no apologies here and the way that this author writes her conclusion. You know, this is what I've shown, this is my argument. She owns that, and that's what you want to do in your conclusions as well. Um, some other things about writing a literary paper, your paper needs a title, and you want that title to be interesting, and you want that title to grab the reader's attention. Read over this part of it carefully, so make sure that you have a title that works that way. In terms of your audience, I mean, let's be realistic. For your courses, you're writing for your professor. It is your professor who is going to read your work, right? But at the same time, for a literature course, you're also thinking of the other students in the class because those students have also read the literary work. However, their interpretation of the literary work may be very different than your interpretation of the literary work. So your job is not to summarize what has happened because they've read the work itself. They know what has happened in the work. What they do not know is they do not know your particular interpretation of that work. Two students in the same class can read the same literary work and come to it in very different ways. So when you're writing your paper, what you're doing is you're showing to your audience how you approach this literary work, and that is your argument. So you don't want to summarize. At the bottom of this document, you'll see some other tips about using the author's last name, literary present tense. You want to read over that carefully and things of that nature. One of the other things that you'll want to do in your papers as well, you'll want to use quotations, but we'll go over quotations in another document. Right, I hope this has been useful, but as I said at the beginning, you want to make sure that you read this document for yourself because I didn't go over it verbatim. And also, as you continue to write papers in this class, each time you get a new paper assignment, you might want to review this paper assignment again. I mean, this document again to refresh your memory of what was presented in it. If you have any questions about what's in the document that you need to ask me specifically, feel free to email me. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.